And we're live.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I call to order today's regular council meeting of the Township of Cappamonigan on this Monday, November 15th. I'd ask for approval of today's agenda with the addition of 2 maps for item 9.3, moved by Councillor Huntley and Deputy Mayor Graham. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item is closed session. There is none. We'll move right into our presentation. Item 6.1, Daryl Abbs and Gary Scanlon from Watson & Associates, economists, water and wastewater rate analysis. I'll wait for Daryl and Gary to be added into the room. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
They've been added.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I see Daryl and Gary are added. Gary and Daryl, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of council, Mr. Mayor. Always a pleasure to be before you. So today we've put together a presentation with respect to the water and wastewater rates, and we'd be pleased to present our findings. Cindy, could you start the presentation for me, please? Okay. So okay, there we go. So this presentation will extend on work that we did last year for the municipality. Last year, we had calculated an update for the rates, and we had gone through the different drivers which were affecting the charges. At that particular point, we had run a few scenarios for council, and council had adopted a 0% rate increase for the water and wastewater rates. So there was no change year from 2020 to 2021. We had observed that with the 0% rate increase that potentially we'd need to have a 2.25% increase in subsequent years. So that's something that we had presented. The council suggested that go with the 0% increase and then come back and relook at the drivers that are affecting the calculations and report back to council. And that's why we're here. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to jump ahead on our findings, and that's highlighted in the bottom, and then I'll come back to explain at a high level, and then we'll go to a little bit more detail. But from where we were observing 2.25% rate increases, we're suggesting now that we can reduce that to 1.5% annually. A couple of things that changed, and once again, we'll be showing you the details as we go through this presentation, but there was more customers than what was forecast to hook into the system. So it was a little bit more about building activity. So more customers provide additional contributions to the municipal finance for water, wastewater, and as well, they increase the amount of volumes, the amount of water they're consuming. So there's 2 parts of the water and the wastewater bill. There's a fixed, what we call a base charge, that's there every month. And then there's a volume charge. So whatever's going through the meter, we read that, and you pay based, there's a water and a wastewater rate for what's read through the meter. As well, there's, with the growth accelerating, there's been additional contributions that have been made for the development charge reserve fund. So the development charge is what we impose against developers, and that money helps to pay for the infrastructure that we've built in order to allow for them to proceed. So we've received additional money. One extra thing, which isn't on this slide, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. There was also a delay in about $300,000 worth of capital works. So that has affected the calculations as well, because basically the money is still sitting in the reserve funds. We haven't drawn it down. So those funds are to be used for next year's operating budget and moving forward. So with the all of those adjustments, as I say, our forecast is actually dropped from a 2.25% increase to a 1.5% annual increase. Next slide, please. And as I say, we'll go through some of the calculations that we presented last year and show you how we've updated them for this year. Next slide again, please. These are the 2020 rates, or sorry, the 2021 rates. They're basically the same because we didn't have an increase. And as you can see, on the left-hand side is your water related billing charges, and that's in the blue. And on the green on the right-hand side is your wastewater. So as I've noted, there are two components to it. As you can see, the meter size drives the monthly charge. So that charge is in place whether you're at home consuming water or if you decide to go to Florida for a month or two, you still pay that basic amount every month, because that contributes towards the totality of paying for the infrastructure, as well as ensuring that the system functions perfectly for when you come back from your trip. The lower part, you can see the volume charge. That's the amount that gets read through the meter. So you pay for every cubic meter of water. A cubic meter is if you buy one of the bottles of water from the store, they're 500 millimeters. They're like a half a liter. So for the $1.82 that we show for the water, you can actually buy 2,000 of those bottles. So that's to put it into perspective. So you can see on the water side, if you're a residential user, you're going to pay $32.68 per month for water. And there's a $60.47 charge per month for wastewater. And then for what is read through the meter, you pay $1.82 for the water and $2.49 for the wastewater. So that is how the bill gets constructed. When you see it on a monthly basis, that's how the bill gets constructed. Next slide, please. The customers, as I've noted, we have more customers than we originally expected. When we started in 2019, you had in total 826 water users. You can see the biggest number, the 818, those are basically your single family homes. As we go through the bigger meters and such, then you get into businesses who normally need a higher amount of water coming into their buildings. So, but you can see the predominance there is your residential customers. Similarly, on the wastewater, we got a slightly lower number. Not everybody who's on water is hooked up to the wastewater system. Now, if you look on the lower half of this presentation, you can see we had on the left-hand side a forecast of customers, and we were expecting 50 new customers in 2020 and 60 in 2021. We actually exceeded that with 86 in 2020 and 78 in 2021. So that additional, when I spoke to, we received, there's more customers who are paying the base charge. There's more customers generating volume, and they pay development charges. There's the increase there going from 50 to 86 and 60 to 78. Next slide, please. One of the things we look at as we're trying to forecast into the future is take a look at the average amount of volumes that each customer on average uses. So this is 4 years worth of history. And you can see that the billable volumes, so the average amount of volumes that are consumed, has actually been decreasing. So we had almost 150 cubic meters 2017. 2018, it was down about 144, and you can see we've dropped down at about 133. So on a per customer basis, we've seen a bit of a drop. Now, this is a difficult area because depending on the weather patterns affects how much water is consumed. It's estimated in Canada that the average home, about 40% of the water use is outside the home. So that's watering your lawn, washing your car, filling your pool, etc. So that's affected by water. So about 40% of the water usage is affected by, if you have a wet year, so lots of rain, obviously people aren't watering their lawns as much or washing their cars. If you have a very dry year, the volumes go up because they're consuming more water for the same purposes. So for right now, the average over the 4 years is 140 cubic meters, and we've continued with that number into the future. Next slide, please. This is to just summarize the forecast for the water, and I apologize for the sizing on this, but the top table is giving you the total number of customers who will be paying both the base charge, well, basically the base charge. So we started off, you can see as we move ahead, we're up to, for the end of 2021, we expect to have 951 customers, and that'll be increasing to 1,000, 1,030, 1,070, et cetera. So we are providing for additional customers to come on stream. And as I say, as they come on stream, they contribute more money towards the water system as well. On the bottom is the volume. So the volume rate, the volumes are what is being pumped into the system. So you have your water treatment facilities, you're pumping the water into the system. And what we're reading here is the amount of water that's actually going through the water meters at the house. So this is the billable volumes that we see. And you can see they jumped up from 135 to 141 in 2020 and 2021, and they'll continue to increase over every year over the forecast period. Next slide, please. Similar here on the wastewater side, you can see just the starting point is slightly lower number of wastewater customers, but we have the same amount of growth. So that new growth line is exactly the same between the two forecasts. And as I say, we start off with a slightly lower volume for wastewater, but as we move out over time, the amount of increase that we forecast for water is the same for wastewater. And once again, these are billable volumes. They're what are read through the water meter. We use the water meter as the basis for imposing or recovering our wastewater costs. Next slide. Excuse me. So the capital program has been basically extended. We had a 10-year forecast in the last study. We've worked with staff to review those forecasts. For the most part, they're very, very, very similar. There is a difference with respect to wastewater. You can see the third bullet. There is the introduction of one project, Headworks at the wet well, and an associated stress test, but there's no changes on the water side. So we had to augment the forecast a little bit on wastewater. Now, the last bullet just acknowledges that the municipality has a study going on right now, which is being done by R.V. Anderson, and they'll be looking to assess the longer term capital needs for the Millbrook servicing areas. That work is not completed, and we have not included anything in our work at this time, but it will be subject to the subsequent water and wastewater rate forecasts. Next slide. Excuse me. So this is the growth forecast for water. And you can see that in total, there's about $4.1 million expected to be spent over the next 10 years. We're starting off for 2022. We're looking at about $600,000 in works, increasing to about $1 million, and then it's in about 350,000 per year for the next several years, increasing to 500,000 by the end. So these works are predominantly for existing assets. You can see that's the top half of this. About a little over $3 million will be spent towards the existing system, replacing water mains, pumping stations, etc. The lower part is what's called growth related. That's to service new development in the Millbrook area. And you can see that in total, we're probably talking about $1 million in expenditures for growth related works. Now, once again, the growth related works are 100% recoverable from the money that the developers pay for, but the municipality has to cash flow those works. So next slide. This slide shows the similar capital program, but this is for wastewater. And can you move it up just a little bit, Cindy, so we can see the total amount? There we go. So you can see in total, we're approaching $4 million for the wastewater program. Next year, we're looking at about $445,000, and then we jump up to about $1.9 million, and then it tends to taper off in the latter part of the forecast. Once again, the growth-related projects are at 100% growth, and the non-growth is money that's spent in order to replace existing assets. Next slide. There's not a lot of magic to the funding availability for municipalities. Basically, external money would come from perhaps grants from the province. You will recall that a sizable amount of grants was made available about 6 years ago from the province and the feds in order to contribute to the Millbrook water and wastewater systems. At this particular point, there's no grants that we have forecasted. We're hopeful of seeing some news on the horizon, but nothing's been announced at this time. So for the most part, our funding comes from a couple of different things. It can either be from development charges, and that money can only be spent on growth. If we don't have the money in the bank, then we either have to debenture, or we need to sit down with the developing landowners and have them assist in financing the works in order to minimize the cash flow for the municipalities. So that's something we have talked about with staff. I'm sure we'll be back to revisit that with the developing landowners. What's left and for capital financing is basically money that we either raise by debt, or we may have some money in reserves right now, or as we go out over time, we need to continue to replenish the reserves by transferring money from the operating budget and directly into the reserves, and that helps to pay for the infrastructure. Now, you'll see in a moment that we don't have a check mark beside the debt. We are trying to minimize the debt levels right now because the municipality has a fairly significant amount of debt that they pay for all capital. The province allows for a 25% of total owned revenues as the maximum, and I think you're running in and around 18%. So we're looking to keep the debt levels for the water and the wastewater systems at a minimum. So right now, the forecast we'll be providing you with is based on development charges and then money from the reserve or replenishing the reserves with operating budget transfers. Next slide, please. Now, last year, we had projected at the end of 2020 that we'd have about $2.4 million in combined water and wastewater reserves. And if you see at the top, if I go going from the top down, we have two reserves for water. One, which is the general capital reserve, and then there's the development charge reserve. And that one was in a, we forecasted that that would be in a negative by the end of the year. On the wastewater side, we've got a positive 900,000 in the capital reserve and a positive development charge reserve right now. So we started off at, we expected to be at about 2.4 million, but actually we're a little bit higher at 3.4 million. And as I noted earlier, we deferred capital program. We had increased volumes. So there was revenue off of the water bills from the volume side and the fixed base charge. And at the end of the day, you can see that we're in a more positive position, basically $1 million more than what we anticipated. So that helps us as the starting marker for looking at the capital spending program. Next slide. In total, we're looking at spending about $4.5 million on water. So this is inflated, so we've added inflation to it. You can see about $1 million will come from the development charge reserves and about 3.5 will come from the water reserve. On the wastewater side, you can see the growth side is the capital infrastructure for growth is more significant than what we need to replace for the wastewater reserves. So in total, we need about $4.2 million. As I say, about 600,000 from the, I should actually say wastewater reserve, not water reserve. I apologize for that. And then the 3.6 from the DC reserve. Next slide, please. Operating budgets, for the most part, your expenditures should go up with inflation. A lot of the day-to-day costs trend over time to be running with inflation, which we've assumed to be 2%. We have seen utilities, materials, and supplies increasing at faster rates. So within the budget, we've accelerated those at 5% per year. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, excuse me, this is meant to reflect the spending in your operating budget for water. And you see on the bottom, we've broken it into three components. Operating costs, so that's the pure day-to-day costs. That's running the water treatment plant, using the chemicals, cleaning and maintaining the water mains out on the roads, if there's breaks and everything, getting the crews out there. So the day-to-day expenditures for 2021 is about $370,000. You can see so that's the dark blue that's at the bottom of the graph. The orange and the lighter blue are basically related to your capital spending. The existing debt charges, that's basically money that's been spent in the past, and you went out and borrowed debentures, so now you're paying for it into the future. And then there's the capital program that we've talked about, so there's still continuing expenditures to be made, and that's what the lower, kind of lighter blue represents. 376,000 in the early part of the forecast, rising to about 600,000, 660 at the latter part, in order to minimize debt or eliminate debt really, and to fully fund the capital program. So you can see that 370,000 out of 850,000. So about 60% of the water bill goes towards infrastructure. And about 40% goes towards the day-to-day expenditures. Okay, so it's very important because your municipality, like most municipalities, what's emerging in Ontario is that the capital spending to replenish, maintain, life cycle costing on the assets, those are the most compelling drivers for municipalities across Ontario. Some are ahead of the curve, and there's a number of municipalities that are just starting to basically increase the rates and increase their capital spending. So we will see rates increasing across Ontario over the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. On the wastewater side, you can see very similar types of graphs. Once again, the dark blue represents the day-to-day operating costs. It's about 700,000. The capital related for debt and for reserve transfers is about 870,000. Once again, we're about 55–60% capital related in your spending. The day-to-day operating expenditures represent in the range of about 40%, $700,000. Next slide. We talked about the reserve balances. So we're in a little bit better position than at the end of this year than what we expected. And that's a good starting point. When we move out and we look at the forecast over time, you can see that this is the water reserves. You can see that the lower one, which is the development charges, we expect that to go into a negative fairly quickly. Now, it started originally in a negative, but we had some growth move ahead better than expected. So it kept it in a positive basis, but we're seeing it go negative. So this is the area when I've noted that we need to, in conjunction with staff, to have some discussions with the developing landowners to assist in funding this. I think that's an important thing that we need to do over the next. You see on the top part, those are your general reserves, and we've allowed those reserves to basically increase. We need to put the money in there to fund the capital program, and we are allowing for a slight level of increase over time because number one, the development charge reserve funds in a negative, and part two is municipalities are having to address the provincial piece of legislation called Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. That's the one I said are going to affect all municipalities across Ontario. And we need to be doing asset management, replacement schedules, and to look at what the pace is to replace that infrastructure. As an aside, based on information from staff, the municipality has invested about $50,000 per customer to get the water into the house and then the sewage to be taken from the house and basically treated at the sewage treatment plant. So when you think about $50,000 per customer, that's a sizable amount of investment. So we need to be mindful in our reserve funds, keeping the balances and keeping money available, and to be doing the capital spending to stay ahead of our needs for keeping the infrastructure current and functioning properly. On the next slide gives you the wastewater, and it's very similar. You can see on the bottom, we're going to see the development charge reserve fund go into a negative. It's going to peak at about $4 million by the end of the forecast. So this is something we need to be working with. You can see on the top is the general reserve, and we've had that increasing right now to in part balance off the negative balances on the development charge. Now, once the municipality finishes with their asset management, and if we're successful in developing front-ending agreements with the developers, we may come back and revisit these two calculations. But at this particular point, I think this is what we need to do in order to move forward with the level of capital spending in the capital program. Next slide, please. So if we take a look, just the results of everything we just talked about, we've been able to reduce the annual rate increases from 2.25% to 1.5%. As I say, we've got more customers. who are paying more base charges, more volume charges. They've contributed higher amounts towards both the DC reserve fund and the existing reserve funds, the capital reserves. And based on those different factors, we've been able to suggest a 1.5% annual rate of increase. Next slide. And this just at a very high level, and I apologize, are doing the details for municipal finance. You have to combine your capital program, look at your reserve funds. It falls down onto your operating program, and that's how we calculate the rates. And that's what these different graphs are. In very simple terms, if you look at the top table, that's the capital budget, the capital spending we talked about. And we're funding it with that kind of light brown color. Those are transfers from your reserves. If you go down to the next table, that's your reserve or reserve fund balances. I presented this to you earlier, and you can see there's the funding for the capital program being transferred to the capital. You can see that in the reserve funds, there is money coming in from the operating budget. So that's when I talked about reserve transfers to help replenish the reserve funds, that's the money coming in. And then there's money that's being transferred to the reserve fund in order to fund the growth-related debt charges. As we move down to the operating forecast, you can see those colors. Those are the expenditure transfers. And then as we go down a little bit further, you can see we have our recoveries. And at the end of the day, we're calculating 1.5% annual increases on both the base charge and the volume charges. And on the next slide, I won't go through as much detail, but at your pleasure, you can see it's the same type of relationships. And these are detailed out in our memo provided to staff in much more detail, but you can see at the end how we've arrived at 1.5% increase for both water and wastewater. Next slide, please. If we take a look at the water and the wastewater bills, once again, I apologize for the details, but in very simple terms, we've shown you what the base, if I go to the water at the top, you see the monthly base charge is $65, and you can see the 1.5% increase in 2022, 2023. You can see the volume rate starting at $1.82. Once again, we've increased that at 1.5%. Then the next two lines are the amount of money that would be generating based on 140 cubic meters consumption. And that gives you an annual water bill, which translates into a bi-monthly bill every 2 months of $107, or roughly $53.50 per month. Done the same type of thing on your on the wastewater. And if you take a look at that chart and you just want to interpret it relative to the bill that you actually see, you can see that the bill is normally gives you in the middle and kind of starting at the top part, you can see reading. So that's when we go out and read your meter. And you can see the current period, subtract the prior period. This particular resident consumed 23.34 cubic meters. We multiply that by the rates that we gave you, and so the sewer charge and the water charge component below is the volume. So you can see that $58 for the sewer, $42 for the water, and then there are those fixed charges, the $120, $121 roughly for the sewer, and the fixed charge for water. And that's how we come up with your water and your wastewater bill. So as I say, what we'll be looking at in overall on these bills is a 1.5% increase in both the fixed charges and the volume charges. Next slide, please. The difference in what we presented to council last year, the first line you can see is what we projected as a water bill based on so these are bi-monthly bills every 2 months. And the top one is at 2.25%, which was our projection, versus what we've calculated now at 1.5%. You can see the first year would be a reduction from what we calculated before, an annual reduction of about $17. Into the next year, it's a savings of $35, and it's a savings each and every year. And then in the last year at these rates, your overall water bill would be reduced by $158 versus what we had presented before. Next slide. So things to consider through this piece is that there are further legislative changes that may be coming. I think right now we're reflecting the current legislation and our understanding of the infrastructure replacement needs. There is some work that'll maybe provide more information, but at this point in time, we think these are reasonable contributions. We are looking at maybe discussing with the developers at a minimum. We're looking to update the DC charge, and we will put into place the requirement for the developers to at least pay at the time of subdivision. And we will be discussing with staff even earlier prepayments, which will help to deal with the deficits in the DC reserve. And that'll translate into either front-ending or prepayment agreements. These are different types of actual agreements that the Development Charges Act allows for. Next slide. Just to compare the water and the wastewater bills, you can see that we've provided for a number of municipalities in and around your general area. You can see that the water bill is fairly comparable to many others. The lowest bill here is we've reached down to Port Hope. They're about $400 for 12. Peterborough's running at about $472. Your current rate is at $647. You can see there's a number of municipalities that are actually quite a bit higher. And so the increase that we're recommending is roughly about a $10 per year increase from $647 to $657 for your average water user. It's on the next slide, the wastewater, where you can see that the amounts are higher than others. The wastewater is expensive, and with a lot of municipalities that are on stream-based systems, so you're discharging into rivers or streams, versus those municipalities that discharge, let's say, into Lake Ontario, there's a far higher cost associated with treatment because there's less water for the discharge to basically dissolve within. So your system is at the higher end. You can see that that's the largest part of your water and your wastewater bill. We'd be looking at about a $17 a year increase on the wastewater bill. And if we look at the next slide, will give you a combined comparison. You can see that basically we're a little bit higher than, higher than many. There are a lot of municipalities trending at about $1,400, $1,500. You're a little bit higher, trending at about $1,700. And then there are other, like Autonomy South Monaghan, much more expensive just for water, basically. So this gives a perspective. I would note that when I look across Ontario, we do about a third of the water and the wastewater rates across Ontario. There are municipalities that have moved ahead to replace their systems. You, for example, have been making sizable contributions and replacements on your treatment facilities and with their pipes. So to some extent, you're ahead of the curve on this asset replacement, which gives rise to higher rates. But across the province, we see many municipalities that are in that $15,000 to $2,000 range when they fully embraced the asset management plans. So it's a trend that's been there. as a result of changing legislation by the province. Next slide. So just to conclude, as I say, we've updated the forecast. There have been some refinements that have been provided in part through growth within the municipality, as well through staff refining the capital budget. So, but we have been able to reduce the forecast rate now from 2.25% down to 1.5%. Next slide. And that concludes, Mr. Mayor, my presentation. I'm more than happy to answer any questions of council.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Any questions from members of council? Councillor Huntley.
Thanks. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Scanlon. Thanks again for the report and the great detail you went into it. And I do appreciate you taking a few of those extra slides that we asked for previously. My question comes back down to with the DC reserves and them sitting in negative. Does that imply that the developers aren't covering those costs? The township has to cover those costs, or is that just a means of cash flow and in terms of what's going on with the developers?
Exactly, Councillor, through the mayor. We're reflecting the fact that for water and wastewater, you normally have to build the system so then they have something to hook into. So municipalities are always having to build the infrastructure in advance of the development. There are opportunities to engage with the developers. We've been doing quite a bit of that lately with other municipalities to get their assistance to prepay or pre-finance some of these infrastructure expenditures in order to minimize the overall impact on your cash flow.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none. All right, motion then to receive that presentation. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Huntley, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
You're muted, Kathy.
Sorry. Yes.
wonderful, and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Thank you very much, Gary. Daryl, you got off easy today. Very good. You do the next one. All right. Before we get too much further, though, the clerk did point out that I did skip over item number 4, which is the ask any members of council declaring a pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof at this time or when the situation arises. Apology, clerk. Thanks. Good catch. Okay. Seeing none, we will move into minutes then. Minutes of the regular council meeting held November 1st, 2021. Motion to adopt those minutes. Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Moore. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Councillor Belch is muted. We'll carry on,
Mayor
Madam
McFadden,
Clerk.
I have sent him a request. I'm not sure why he's muted there, but we'll come back. Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Well, every vote matters, but this is going to pass with or without that vote, so we will carry on. And
I
next,
kept pressing the thing when.
oh, there we go.
Hearing on, you're good now.
Okay. Councillor Belch, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
very good. Okay, motion is approved. Next item, Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, minutes of October 21st. Motion for those minutes. We got Councillor Huntley and Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Motion is approved. Okay, before we get into reports, I'm just going to call a quick recess and we'll get right back at it. Give me 5 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know if we answered your question. You were just asking what to click.
Yeah, it's alt something.
Okay, who is ready? Deputy Mayor Graham,
I am.
Councillor Moore,
I'm ready, Mayor McFadden.
all right. Oh, Councillor Huntley, and Councillor Belch should be here too. I'll just poke your head in that room there. His page just confirming he's actually there.
Give me one moment.
Please let them know you're here. And can I start?
Yep.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Ready to go then. We will continue. All right. Moving into reports then. Item 9.1, Report Finance 2021-17, Water and Wastewater Rate Analysis and Water and Wastewater User Fees and Charges Bylaw. Ms. Pope and Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Council. As a follow-up to the report today from Watson Associates, we're providing you with the analysis and the user fees and charges bylaw. As you know, Council approved a 0% increase or no increase for the 2021 year. And so we're presenting today in consultation with our consultant, the 1.5% increase from 2022 to 2025 with the information as provided today in the report.
Very good. Questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none. Motion then receive the report and accept the recommendation. Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Moore. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next, item 9.2, Report Public Works 2021-18 RFP Public Works 21-02 for the design and engineering services for Main Street water main replacement. Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, recommendation before you is that council authorize staff to retain the services of Engage Engineering Limited for the design and engineering services for the Main Street water main in the amount of $42,130 plus net HST in the amount of $741.49 for a total of $42,871.49. And just as a note, this project was included in the capital water budget for 2021. We did not proceed. We have applied, finance and ourselves did an application for, it's an ICIP green grant, I think is the term they use, but it is a funding program. So our intent was to have the design completed out of the funds that are a carryover and to only, once we receive hopefully approval of the project, that we proceed where we get 2/3 funding. So that's kind of what we're waiting for on the project side. In the meantime, we're trying to initiate design.
Very good. Any questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Graham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Just a question with regards to this RFP process. Seeing the submissions that we did receive, was there, when we talked about the amount of volume of work and the amount of capital, investment that we're talking about, is this in line with what we forecasted in that capital plan with the anticipated costs, or is it below, or where in relation to this are we thinking this falls?
Well, first of all, through Mr. Mayor to the Deputy Mayor, we did receive 4 proposals. The dollar amounts are shown in the report, and the $42,000 design fee is reasonable related to a $200,000 project on a water main. You have to recognize that we are allowing for a water main replacement on an existing roadway. So the design has to include the future profile of that roadway, and we have to try and take into account future urbanization, which is not part of the program. We had looked at that some time ago, and we just said, let's at least go ahead and have the water main fixed. So the design fees that are proposed here are in line with what we'd normally see on a design project of this nature. We have, as you know, projected 10 years of capital, both water, wastewater. So this is the one piece, and we had not gone ahead in 2021. So we are asking to do the design work, and we're not proposing to go to construction until we see some results on the application to the province.
So it would be a fair summary then of the $250,000 we were probably forecast. And you mentioned about $200,000 for the work itself, that there was around 50,000 of that 250 that was allocated for this design work.
Yes.
Okay, so that helps me understand exactly where we're at. So thank you for that.
Very good. Any other questions from members of council? I see Councillor Huntley.
Just through you, Chair, to kind of follow up on Deputy Mayor Graham's line of questioning there. The 250,000 was what we were contributing to on top of what we'd get for the ICI, right? So by only spending the 40 out of that 250 right now, the rest of that 200 you're looking to roll it over to next year, I assume, then to continue the project. Like
we would
$200,000 that's going to be spent this year.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Huntley. The amount remaining would be carried over into 2022 capital program.
Okay.
Very good. Any further questions? None. Okay. Motion then to receive that report and accept the recommendation. Good, Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, record a vote.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next report, item 9.3, report Public Works 2021-19, former Millbrook Correctional Facility groundwater investigation. Mr. Hancock. And this is the report that has the additional maps available whenever the appropriate time is to display them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the recommendations before you is, and this has sort of been an ongoing report where we're trying to track the well monitoring testing that's going on the IO's property. So recommendation number one is that council received Public Works Report 2021-19 as information. Recommendation number two is that council direct staff to meet with MECP and IO to ensure testing continues on the former correctional facility and the municipal wells. Recommendation number three is that council direct staff to seek legal advice and identify the municipality's liability related to future testing and treatment of the municipal supply wells. And recommendation number four is that council request in writing to be notified of the stage 3 circulation as we've expressed a formal interest on the property. As council is aware, Mike Bingham is a senior project manager with Cambium. He is our technical support and peer review consultant on this project. So and this has, I think, been ongoing for a number of years, so we have tried to update council as we have gone through the process. So Mike is available at this meeting to answer any questions, and at an appropriate time, we're going to pull up the two maps that the mayor has referred to. Just as a comment though, we see that the testing is ongoing, and I think the report speaks to, in technical terms, a lot of the results, but we're finding generally that it's not showing to be if any hazardous conditions and what they call materials in the well that are of bad nature. So we are finding that the results are showing the wells to be relatively clean, and we believe that IO will be filing soon a record of site condition that will probably state that. And we also expect that the Ministry of Environment is going to basically probably agree with the results of the testing and probably give them a clean bill of health. Our concern has not changed over the years. We've said we believe there's a liability that we could be facing at the municipal wells. We do not want to be pressured into providing that testing at our wells when we had no involvement in the creation of the problem in the first place. So that's why we're seeking the legal advice. And we believe that the IO will, the provincial body will basically put the property up for sale with the record of site condition that probably speaks to not having any contamination on the site. I see Mike has joined us there by Zoom, so I'm just going to leave it at those comments. And when you want the maps to be brought up, Cindy has those available, so just let us know. But that's the general, I don't know whether Mike you want to add to that, but that's kind of our general concerns, and that's the lead in of the recommendations we have before you.
Very good. Questions from members of council? We're going to let Mike off easy too. Okay, no questions. All right. Making a motion then to receive that report and accept the recommendation. Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Huntley, Madam Clerk, record a vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Councillor Moore,
I
you were
think-
muted.
Yeah, I got it. Sorry.
There we go.
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. And apologies, Councillor Moore, that's twice in a row that Councillor Huntley has fired up his hand just before you put yours up.
That's okay.
I'll be sure to delay it for an extra second.
As long as you know I'm taking part, that's all.
So we will catch up with that next time. All right, next report then is item 9.4, Report Public Works 2021-20 Municipal Solar Units Update Revised. Mr. Hancock?
Thanks very much, Mike, by the way.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mike.
Through you to Councillor, Mr. Mayor, the report before you is Municipal Solar Units Update Revised. Recommendation number 1 is that Council receive the Public Works Report 2021-20 for information, that Council approve the reduced interest rate on the internal solar unit loan from the asset replacement reserve to 2% from the present 6% on the principal amount of $161,161.56, and the remaining at December 31st, 2021 until the existing term ending in January 1st, 2025. That, and recommendation number 3 is that staff report back to council after the 1-year period on the success of the ongoing maintenance program, monitoring of the system, and revenues by Generation Solar. In this regard, I have asked, Simon actually is with, I don't know, he's connected in, is he not, Cindy?
Through Mayor McFadden to Wayne Hancock, yes, he is.
So Simon is with us. He's the technical, he's with Generation Solar as one of their lead people. He has went through a process with me probably over the last year in providing ongoing maintenance, but his familiarity with the system, and he did put together the proposal that is before us as part of the attachment. So I've asked him to be available for any technical questions of that nature. So Simon is available. I believe Mr. Mayor has to be approved by council before he's allowed to speak. So that's
very good.
So on the report there, generally we've tried to address all the concerns that council had in going back and sort of laying out the revenues costs on the tables. We've looked at what the impact was on the loan and tried to present that. So Kimberly is a part of this report. She's did a review with us, quite significant review. So I thank her for that. And of course, Yvette has overseen the complete report process. So with that being said, we believe, and I think Simon can speak to that, we believe with proper maintenance that the revenues on this, which were originally projected at 8,000, can get back to or can be retained at 7,800 per unit, and that is projected in the budget going forward to 2022. And on the interest rate of the 6%, we have, I think Kimberly has provided an attachment that shows the reduced payments in that regard. So with this being said, we're available for questions both on the technical side from Simon, myself, and Kimberly.
Very good. All right, so we will start then with a motion to permit Simon to address council then. We got a mover from Deputy Mayor Graham and a seconder from Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, record a vote.
Through you, Mayor McFadden, can we get Simon's last name?
Yes, you can. Hi, Simon. Oh, you're muted, sorry.
My last name's Boone, like Daniel Boone, Boone.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Simon.
Sorry, I should apologize for that, Simon. I should have mentioned that right up front there, but anyhow, we have it covered now.
So we just need to finish the recorded vote. Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes,
and Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Thank you.
very good. Motion is approved. Questions from members of council? Okay, Councillor Belch.
Through you, Mayor, just wondering, of all of the solar panels, how many do we have and how many are actually operating at this time?
So through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Belch, we have 8 what's referred to as 10 kilowatt microfit units. Those are the units that were installed back in 2013, 2014, and they are under the long-term contract with Hydro One. So we have them located. I think the locations were presented in the previous report, but we have 8 in the municipality. All are operating. Some have higher revenues than the others, and we've been dealing with what might be attributing to that lower revenue on those units. So we have, for the most part, and again, Simon has done the majority of the work, we have addressed a lot of the issues that were reducing the revenues, and that was as much as trees overhanging the units to them not having some of the fixtures on the units themselves weren't operating. So that's part of the process we've gone through to date. And then we've hired this group to sort of stay on maintenance for the next year and see if we can correct some of the revenue problems that we've seen. So there is 8 units there.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Question from Deputy Mayor Graham.
Through you, this is for Wayne or maybe for Kimberly. In the end of the report, there's a discussion about the creation of a reserve, a separate reserve for future considerations of disposal. Is there a need to create another sort of isolated reserve for any sort of financial or organizational reasons, or would it simply just go into more of the general working fund?
Ms. Pope.
I can speak to that. Thank you. We actually had that approved by council when we first started the program. We've been putting away a total for the 8 units. It's $2,500 a year. Was to have the disposal allocation to the reserve. It is one of our reserves that currently exists, and we continue to deposit the funds into there. And it is separate for the sole purpose of taking down the units or disposing of them in the future after their useful life is expired.
Sorry, I may have misspoke, Ms. Pope. That was hard to say. I was referring to when we say in the very last paragraph of the report, we're recommending that any future surpluses generated are going to be after the repayment and disposal, et cetera, and operating costs are covered. And that's the reserve I was looking about, questioning about, not the disposal reserve.
Perfect, thank you. Actually, you are correct. That would be new because we haven't had a surplus at this point yet with the operations there, but we definitely will in the future. That's what we're hoping on. And it would definitely be a new reserve. And then we would await council's decision making as to how you wanted to deal with the additional revenues as they come in.
Okay, so so my question was, is there some financial management requirement to create another one, or should we just literally put it in a general working fund? Because I don't think by the numbers that we're seeing, it's going to be a significant amount of surpluses whenever we get there. So I just wondered if it was anything required, if there was a requirement due to any sort of program or things of that nature, rather than just put whatever little amounts are there into the general surplus. So that was my comment.
That would be a discussion of council. You could definitely put it into general if council didn't want to track it separately, and that would be no problem. There are no requirements or restrictions. We're basically looking at once we hit 2025, because there will only be one payment in January, and then thereafter, no further payments for the infrastructure itself. So all the revenues coming in above the operating costs then will be left over other than disposal amounts. So we'll probably see the most significant funds coming in 2025. And at that time, however council deems it should be moved or used, would be at your discretion to make that decision.
So council at that time will have that opportunity to make that decision.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Very good. Any further questions from members of council? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Chair. To Ms. Pope, I believe. I was trying to go through like reconciling your attachment number 1 with trying to figure out, I guess ultimately when we brought this whole question forward, the question was, are we tracking to what the return was originally slotted for these units? And if not, what are we actually targeting for? And I see you have it down as like 63,000 per unit at this point. But when I look at your attachment 1, I don't see that drop in revenue that's come off of them from Simon's report. I mean, he's reporting that these things were getting, they're almost hitting 40% of what they should have been getting in terms of a revenue. And then on top of that, the expenses going out the back end of it, like we've seen, we're incurring expenses. I saw Simon's was almost $6,000 a year, but you've budgeted for only 4,800 going forward. I'm just how close to accurate is that 6,300 a unit? Like, or do we have to rework this sheet to kind of work in what we know now versus, I think all you changed in it was the repayment schedule for the 62%. But I think there were more factors going on here.
So just through you to council, if we're looking at the units, if you look at, there's 2 categories, because when we first passed this project, it was first with the approval of 2 units. Thereafter, there was a subsequent report that did allow for the additional 6 units, creating the 8 that we have today. The original 2 units, you can see in 2022 and onwards on the sheet, it was updated to reflect the new $7,800. Originally, it was at when the original report came forward, is $8,010. So that was reduced there. And then if you look below on the 6 units, that's also 6 units times the $7,800 as projected. This isn't an actual to budget report saying the total amount that they've earned or realized within the years. This was the projected revenue and how we were going to repay the debt. So we've continued to repay the debt. Where we've made the changes is 2022 forward, showing that now there's a reduced revenue amount that's coming through. And then down below, the cost of the loan reduced now to the 2% as well. So, and then of course, maintaining all the reserve transfers, et cetera, for the disposal at the end. This wasn't an updated actual budget. For that purposes, the other sheet that was provided by Public Works Department, the revenue to cost summary, that provided you with the actuals or the changes that actually occurred year over year, what they realized. That's the one that's showing that kind of comparison.
Through you, Chair, but I mean, these 2 sheets should tie together, right? Because now if we go down to attachment 1, you're not reflecting the fact that you weren't getting the same revenue off those things. So the 6,300 as your projected revenue isn't correct.
At the time of this is an updated report. So at the time of the report back in 2013, this was the projected revenue that we provided council. We're giving new projections from 22 onward. It wasn't to be a mix of the projected and the actuals. That's why they're presented separately.
I'm really struggling because the 6,200 is a completely meaningless number. Because what you need to do then, if you're projecting, you need to project from 22 forward only, not including what's already happened, because you're just ignoring what's already happened in terms of revenue and expenses.
Because we're not showing the total expenses here, we were showing the actual repayment of the principal and interest that occurred based on the estimated revenues that we thought we'd bring in every year. It's not this is not an operating budget spreadsheet to compare. That's over on the other sheet. If you wanted them combined, we would have to have had a projected and then an actual spreadsheet put together so that we could show the 2 different, because this is not reporting the same information. This is reporting the loan and the projected revenues that were anticipated in order to base the loan on. and the reduction in the loan and the reduction in the estimated revenues that we believe are happening from 2022 onward. The other aspect too, when you're talking about the contract that which is explained to me by the Public Works Director, is it's a 1-year project in order to get things operating and online, but not necessarily to be continuing annual expense, and therefore not included in the projections for the future.
Okay, so I still think we're combining two things and not giving the right result at the end. So I think, one should have been, how are we tracking today compared to what we started with? And two, with these adjustments in the revenue off of those units and the new found maintenance costs, what's our new projected value right there? You've kind of merged the two of them together to come up with the 6,300.
So we can put these two reports together, provide the projected that we thought we'd incur, and we can provide the actuals on one report. We would just have to modify and bring the two together, because they're not, we'd have to highlight and identify, because they're not speaking to the same values for a reason, because some is projected and some was not projected. So
Right, but
it can be updated for sure if that's what you would like.
I think that's what we were shooting for in this one, Kimberly, is how are we tracking compared to what we're getting, and how are we going to go forward? What's it looking like, right? Because if you're coming forward and asking for us to approve $6,000 worth of maintenance, we need to know whether investing $6,000 worth of maintenance makes sense at this point or not, or maybe we invest more to get more revenue out of it. Because I know, like Simon's sheets there had, here's some stuff you do to increase the revenue out of this stuff. But obviously that comes with an investment, a further investment that was never projected before. So we need to know how efficient is this program up until now, and with those investments in it, how will it get us? What will it get us to? And that's not reflected here.
I think maybe to understand your question there, Councillor Huntley, I think you're saying that over the period from 2014 to 2020, for example, we may have started off with like an increase, or what they call in the black, and then we ended up with a deficit in this account as we go forward. But each year, what happened in our budget process was any surplus showed as a surplus, any deficit showed as being covered by the surplus in Public Works. So if there's a loss in 2017, for example, which is shown on the next table, it is covered off in that year by surpluses within the department. But it was a case that the units probably weren't paying the cost of the loan and all the other costs of upkeep. So there is a case that you have several years of a loss that was covered under the Public Works surplus. Is that your question?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. I think that was understood, Wayne. Like we knew that there was like a 10-year return on investment on these things.
Right.
The question was, were we going to even hit that 10 years? Like substituting or supplementing it with other surpluses to cover this program isn't really showing us what's really happening with this program, right? All I was asking for is, how is this program really performing? And we've kind of have a merging of, here's how it was supposed to perform, here's how we think it'll perform, but not how is it performing, and how do we project it to perform going forward in overall.
So
like, can you tell me that 6,300 per unit is really the number that these things are going to be produced or are going to be added in 2025 or in the lifetime of their contract?
Well, I think the
question.
I think the revenues going forward are as best our consultant has recommended. They said these units should provide a revenue of $7,800 per year. If you're saying that you want us to go back to 2014 or 2015 and pick up whether there's a loss in revenues from the units and have that paid for, that's a different financial table we'll have to.
Sure, not paid for, Wayne. What I'm looking for is reflected, right? Like you've been making only 40% of the revenue off of these things that you expected for the last few years. That's not reflected in these tables. So you have some ground to cover going forward. So even if you get these things back up to 100% efficiency, I mean, you're not going to cover off the 40% that you were losing before, right? So what does it spill out to at the end?
If I can simplify it, Councilor Huntley, are we looking for how much has been spent, how much has been made up to, it doesn't matter by year basis, but just to today, how much has been spent, how much have we made, and rolling forward, how long is it going to be before we have return on investment, and then the projections after that? Does that summarize it up?
Yeah, pretty much.
Just simplify it down. We don't need all the charts. Just how much does it cost? How much have we made? And then that's the today. And then moving forward, we'll simply have what the expected is going to be on the projections. In other words, we want to know what it's all paid for. We want to know what's all paid for and what the expected return as it was. And it's different than obviously what we thought. And then adding in this component that's going to return more efficiency within the unit. I think we could simplify it. I'd simplify it down. Correct, Councillor Huntley? It's not the details per stand and per each one and each year there's nothing one there.
I mean, that's interesting information, but when it starts to tie together, that's kind of what we're looking for. Is like, how's the overall program functioning?
Okay.
How has it functioned? When is it going to do what it was supposed to do? And if it's not going to be, if the target was, we were going to make $100,000 a unit by the time this program was done, we're on chart now for 60,000. Are we really on chart for 60,000 or is it 40,000? Like, what are we ultimately looking at here? With
does that help, Councillor?
With what we know and with what we project.
Does that help, Mr. Hancock, to simplify it? What's being looked
Yeah,
for?
I think, if you're looking for a summary of, what they call revenues versus costs, and it's not by unit and it's by program over the last number of years up to 2020, and projecting through to whenever, then we can certainly do that on one quick table. I don't think that's not a big deal.
Sure. Ms. Hurley, I see you tuned in over there. Update, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess what I'm trying to do is make sure that we have a very clear motion of what is being asked of staff today. So moving forward, if we're talking about we have to bring another report back, I think it would be best that we make a very clear motion so staff understands what's being asked of them.
Sounds fair. Councillor Huntley, do you want to take a stab at it, or do you want me to give the brief version?
Well, I guess ultimately what we're looking for is what is the current financial status of the program, and what does that projection look like by the end of the program?
Yep. Deputy Mayor Graham, do you want to suggest a motion, or you have another? Okay. All right. We've got Deputy Mayor's going to step in here and give us a suggested motion.
So when I look at the second attachment number 2, and you net out the performance, right? Like, you can add up the differences, and it creates, if you do that, it's a deficit of $61,900, 903. So that's the performance to date by taking all of those years and adding them together.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, that's not trending in any sort of an appropriate direction. And I understand that, I guess, after a certain amount of time, there's elements of these costs that are going to be coming off once the thresholds have been met and there's enough in the reserves to cover the divestiture, et cetera, et cetera. But if their initial forecast was that we're going to clear 100,000 on this program, well, to date, we're not, we've got $161,000 now to make up to get to that outcome. Right? Is that a fair summary? And I'd like to understand exactly what is going to change in the next few years of the plan that's actually going to accumulate that amount of money, because we haven't seen anything close to making up that since 2014.
So just as a comment, I think what you've asked for is show us the amount, the outstanding amount of the loan, which is the 161, and show us what we've lost over the number of years, which you said is around $60,000. So it ends up being $220,000. And then if the projection on revenues is at 7,800 and our costs are covered off properly in the contract, et cetera, then we would be one more year. But we can easily put a table before you that shows that. It's not that difficult. If that's the end result, just what they call it's a summary of gross. It's a summary of losses to a total, and a repayment plan based on the 7,800. That's really where we are, and that's not difficult. We can do that. It shoves the loan out one more year and a bit. That's all. So whatever. I don't have a real, it's not a big problem. If you tell us what you want, we'll give it to you.
That's the
I-
way. Well done.
I mean, I'm looking at whatever table.
I
that we
want
can-
to, I want the program to not be at a deficit all the time. That's what I'd like.
That's where I want it there too, very clearly. That's why we're trying what we're doing.
But we're saying that in the next few years, it's going to be a windfall. And I guess I just don't understand why we think that.
Well, we said it was projected with the maintenance on it would be projected at 7,800 per year. And we said we'll report back in 12 months to see how successful that was. If that's true, then our payment of the main loan was over January of 2025.
Mhm.
If the repayment of funds that have been accrued over the year out of the surpluses is to be accounted for, it's one more year on that process. So that's, I mean, we can do that. Sorry, true to council.
We got Councillor Huntley who's going to work on the second stab of this motion.
Okay.
I don't know about the motion, but all I was going to say is the spreadsheet, like the attachment 1, is actually reflecting the flow to Deputy Mayor Graham's comments. Like if you look at it, it does show you when the loans drop off, and when then you're just dealing with the revenue versus the maintenance, which is what we want to see, right?
Mhm.
But what we want to see is from 2024 to 2021, replace the projections with the actuals, so we can see how it's performed compared to what it was supposed to do during that time period. Then going forward, either we do the maintenance program that Wayne is suggesting, which then you can calculate your projections now based off of that, plus your expense or your maintenance as well. When the loans are fixed, so then you'll be able to see whether this thing's making money, and then over the longer period of time, you can find out per unit whether it's performing the way it was supposed to perform. I don't want to make this more complicated than it needs to be.
So if I can get that back to a motion, we want to know when is the break even going to be, and then how much money we're going to make. Is that simple?
Like I'd like to see attachment 1 come back reflecting reality, not projections. Well, projections for what we don't know, but reality for what we do.
I'm confused because I think that is reality. Is it not up till 2021?
No,
It's forecast.
it's only forecast in there.
Attachment number 1 is forecast only of what the consultants had provided, but 2 is actual.
But
So
choose the actual.
right.
Yeah.
So I believe what Councillor Huntley has requested is that we have both an actual and a projected on the same sheet, so they can see how it's performed, so our council can see how it's performed each year, to show the deficits in the years in which it did underperform, and to look at that overall revenue, including all the deficits from the years past. So I think your description of the break-even point and future projections would encompass that kind of a report.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Okay.
so if we want to turn that into a motion,
Is that a motion?
well done, Ms. Pope.
It's a combination of all of you.
Okay, as long as staff is clear what's being requested right now.
I think
That's Cindy's
bring back attachment 1 to reflect
Break-even point.
to this point and projections going forward
Correct.
to give us an overall health of this program. Is that clear enough, Ms. Pope?
I believe it is, because I'll bring back both the actual and the projected, so you can see the comparison of what's happened to date. So combining all that information on the 2 and the 1, and then also showing the projected forward, and you'll be able to see the deficits from historical, what's come across that, although Director of Public Works has indicated it's been absorbed by the Public Works Department on an annual basis, but we'll make sure that's included, so you can get a better picture.
Thank you.
For sure.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, is just the one question, is that at 2% or 6%?
Well, we hadn't got to that part yet.
Oh, okay, all right. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to miss anything.
Ms. Hurley, you look very concerned because we don't yet have a motion. I know staff has acknowledged that they're able to do the job. However, we don't have a motion instructing them what that is.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like a very clear motion since this is the third time, this will be the third time we bring this report back. So with all due respect, I'd really like to make sure that we're very clear on what is being expected on both sides. So I think Ms. Pope, if I can go back to you, Ms. Pope, you just mentioned a motion that you were somewhat comfortable with. If Councillor Huntley, I can't remember who moved that, but or if we even had a mover on that one.
Well, I don't think
we don't have a motion
Okay.
yet.
We haven't even got there yet. Okay, so Ms. Pope, maybe if you, for Ms. Page's interest too, would you just go over the motion that you just explained one more time, just so we're all comfortable with that?
For sure.
For that one particular motion.
Okay, so for staff to report back with the actual versus projected to date, including the annual deficits, and provide the projections for the solar program. Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, are you okay with that as well?
I'm okay if staff's okay, and that was read by Kimberly, so I'm pretty sure staff's good with that. Do I got a mover in a second, or I'm thinking I'm looking at Councillor Huntley and Deputy Mayor Graham? Looking good. Mr. Hancock, are you okay with that motion?
I just, sure, I have no, I understand that motion.
You asked for it and you'll give it, right?
No, I was just interested in when Kimberly's doing her projection from this year forward, the one recommendation talked about reducing it from 6 to 2%. And I don't think you've dealt with that yet, have you?
Deputy Mayor Graham, is that where you're going?
Yeah, my comment with through you, Mayor, was just going to be that be the fourth recommendation to come back to council as Kimberly outlined, but I don't think it's incongruent with the rest of the recommendations before us. So it's just simply adding it to be a fourth, and I'd be happy to move all four of those recommendations.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4 with what's in, or with what Kimberly's suggested?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and that was with Councillor Huntley and Deputy Mayor Graham?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good, Mr. Hancock?
Good, yeah, always good here.
Fantastic work on renegotiating that 6 down to a 2, no prepayment penalties, nothing. That was fantastic. We'll get you working on the water wastewater mortgages next. Okay, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, staff. Next report, Planning 2021-58, update status report 1066 Sire Line.
Thank you, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Through your worship to the rest of council, you have before you, and I'm going to make one correction. This actually should read Planning Report 2021-59. So with that, you have before you with council is an update with respect to 1066 Sire Line, where the recommendation that council receive report planning 2021-59, update status report 1066 Sire Line for information. This has been a consistent report back in terms of the status of this particular project. As you will recall, we've talked about the 5 studies that were identified, the 3 that the township has undergone and basically paid for. Those have been complete. The reports are complete, and now they're undergoing peer review as per the county official plan amendment policy. So the agricultural impact assessment study, as well as the Hydro-G study, is being peer reviewed by Stantec through the county. The EIS, the environmental impact study, is being peer reviewed through ORCA as part of the work with the county. That work is the peer reviews. The one with ORCA started at the end of October. The other 2 started at the beginning of November. There's typically a 30-day turnaround time for that peer review, at least hopefully before that 30 days. So with that, what I have identified in here is that we still intend to have the notice go out with respect to the public meeting, the statutory public meeting, for not just the official plan amendment, but the zoning bylaw amendment. The hope is that we can do that before the end of November. And with that, with the 20-day notice period, which is under statutory regulation, what we have to do under the Planning Act, that would happen, come forward in the December 20th council meeting. And if that's the case, then we would bring it forward. If there were no objection, there would be the possibility for council to be able to not just approve the zoning bylaw amendment, but the official plan amendment, and then have those proceed to the county at that meeting. Again, part of the sensitivity around the timing is making sure we get that peer review, the work completed, and then the notice going out for that statutory meeting by the beginning of December, actually the end of November. So with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Very good. Questions from members of council? Just one with regards to the peer review. Do we have a date or an idea when they are coming back? Obviously, because everything else is sort of waiting on it.
So through you, council, through you, mayor, to the rest of council, is that typically it's a 30-day turnaround time. The peer review that happened with Orca, that proceeded at the end of October, so it's based on their timeline. With the county, I confirmed with the manager of planning there that it typically is a 30-day turnaround for Stantec. That was started in the beginning of November, but that is a bit of a maximum. So my hope is that we'll be able to come in under that time. I'll make sure that I monitor that and bring and we're sure that we have that. Again, the intent here is to try and hit the date of that by the end of November. We can still have the meeting, the notice with respect to a public meeting that would happen before council in December. And you'll well see in the report on page 2 that I have identified, we've done this before, that the zoning bylaw amendment, the official plan amendment, if there are no objections or complications, there's a possibility that we could have the public meeting. And if that's the case, then council could approve both. So that would then go on to the county, and that would meet the timeline as we've identified in attachment 1.
Okay, so just trying to work through the time. So it's a 30-day public process, right?
So for the peer review, it's up to 30 days.
No, sorry,
Yes.
I'm talking about the once you post it, the public knows. Is it 20 days or 30 days?
It's only 20 days, your worship.
It's 20 days. Okay, so as long as it's in, so that has to be back by the November 30th in order to hit that. Okay,
that's correct.
All right.
Your worship.
Very good. Any other questions from members of council? None. I can see that there's a ton of activity in flurry on that property, and we don't even have it listed. We're not asking anything, but there's I can't believe the number of inquiries I'm having specifically as it relates to that property. And I know, John, you've been getting some too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so stay tuned. Looking good. We are on target to get that done, but we do need that Stantec back for before the end of November. Excellent. There's no further questions then. Motion to receive that report and accept the recommendation. We have Councillor Moore and Deputy Mayor Graham. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Conley. Next item, report CAO capital status. Ms. Hurley, any questions for Ms. Hurley on this?
Mr. Chairman, obviously we'll add the solar report and we'll continue with Sireline, trying to meet those deadlines that Mr. Conley has mentioned as well.
Excellent. Very good. With no questions then, motion to receive that report. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Belch, Madam Clerk.
Mayor
Thank you.
McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Council Committee verbal reports. Deputy Mayor Graham.
Nothing to report at this time. The next Milford Valley Trails meeting is a week from today.
Very good. Councillor Huntley.
Nothing at this time.
Councillor Belch.
I think that we've got a meeting, do we not, for revitalization on the, is it the 18th?
Okay.
Yeah, and Orca, or not Orca, Ganaraska, I think has changed their meeting until, it was supposed to be this Thursday, but I think it's going to be the following Thursday.
Very good. Councillor Moore.
Nothing to report at this time.
Good. Very good. All right. Motion to receive those verbal reports. Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Moore. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Motion is approved. There's no general business, no correspondence for information, no correspondence for action. Bylaws, being bylaw number 2021-66, being a bylaw to authorize the clerk and the deputy clerk to provide civil marriage services to the public, and bylaw number 2021-67, being a bylaw to impose water and wastewater user fees and charges, and bylaw number 2021-68, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of environmental impact mitigation measures agreement between 1972867 Ontario Inc. and the Corporation of the Township of Cabamani, be read a first, second, third time, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto, moved by Deputy Mayor Graham, seconded by Councillor Moore. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. There's no unfinished business, no notice of motion. Confirming bylaw number 2021-69, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held November 15th, 2021, be read a first, second, third time, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto, moved by Councillor Hunt, or Councillor Huntley is the only one that didn't put his hand up. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes,
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
and Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
motion approved. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Huntley. Deputy Mayor Graham. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Meeting is adjourned. Upcoming meetings, Cabamani Public Library Board meeting is Tuesday, November 16th at 7 p.m. via Zoom, correct, Councillor Moore?
Yeah. Yes.
And Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting Thursday, November 18th at 9 a.m. via Zoom, and Moat Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting Monday, November 22nd at 5 p.m. via Zoom.